Hello, I'm Barb with Inspire Me 360, and this is another addition to the episode where we were talking about valuing the self and setting expectations. Now, this particular video might really resonate with, more of the feminine polarity, okay? Again, this video is kind of geared towards women in the sense that valuing ourselves and really coming out of thousands of years of being really oppressed, not even valued, not even considered an actual human being. We have to remember that it's fairly recent that women have begun to get the rights back, or the right to be human. I know when I was younger, I had a beautiful set of grandparents on both sides that taught me so much about the struggles that, especially women, my grandmas were so influential in my life, and really the struggles that women went through in previous eras. And I always have found it so interesting how quickly almost the younger generations have forgotten how far we've come and really what an honor it is to be able to be living in a time where we are starting to see equality. Now, I was born in the 80s, and there was still, a lot of that old boys club energy when I was a young woman. So I saw probably more of it in terms of, maybe than what the millennials are experiencing. Now I feel like it's swung almost to the side where women have over-sexualized themselves in a way that is so unhealthy. So, I definitely want to bring that up in another episode because, this over-sexualization is just really a really overinflated use of the power of feminine energy, and it's not really being put to good use because there's not a lot of wisdom or intellect behind using this certain power of sensuality that all women possess. So again, that's for another episode that I would love to dive into, but for this particular episode, I really want to talk about valuing the self and setting expectations in terms of how others are going to treat you. Now, again, myself, being a woman in business, and also being a woman in business that has a side of myself that loves that feminine energy. I don't want to put on a black business suit. I don't want to pretend that I'm a man. I am very much in my goddess energy is a really weird term. I find it a little bit silly, but I'm going to utilize it here because I think it's a good teaching tool. So I'm very much comfortable in that energy of just being a woman and being able to be feminine while still having strength in that energy. So I think this is the most healthy expansion of the female polarity, in the sense that, I run multi-million-dollar companies. I've created everything from the ground up. They're all my ideas. I've never had a man help me with any of those things. I didn't really have a strong father figure or, any uncles or anything around me to build that masculine energy within myself. So I had I had to cultivate that yin and yang energy from a very authentic place. And I was able to do it, organically. Again, what I mean by this is that obviously in each of us, there lives the feminine polarity and the masculine polarity, because of course we live in a universe that's based on duality. Now, when you are predominantly expressing in the feminine polarity, there is an expression of how that actually looks in the physical 3D world. And I'm not talking about how you look. I mean, obviously that is the expression of, the material world. You're going to look like a woman. But what I mean is how your attitude, your expression, the way that you deal with other people, the way that you deal with situations in life and events. So especially when you are in your feminine energy, you're going to be a little bit softer in certain ways. You're going to be more compassionate, less logical, so a little bit more emotionally based when you're making decisions, which is not a bad thing, okay? It's not, no polarity is wrong or right, okay? The whole goal of our journey here throughout multiple lifetimes and our journey here on Earth in this particular incarnation is to try to balance the polarities. So we're trying to create that equilibrium within the self. And that means that within each of us, again, there is that masculine energy and that feminine energy. So how I've been able to balance the strength that is my feminine energy with that anchoring masculine energy is feeling valued in the self, knowing from a deep place of wisdom what is correct and what is in line with my core home frequency. And really, it's a process about knowing thyself, or knowing the self. And that is going to be unique for each and every individual, okay? Nobody's home frequency or nobody's authentic self is like that of any other. We each have an individualized soul. We each have an individualized mission and purpose as to why we've incarnated here and as to what we are meant to learn. So that's why I have never modeled myself over any other individual. I have no use for it. I actually don't look at anybody else's social media. I don't look at celebrities. I fundamentally, it's not that I don't care, I just don't have a lot of time for it. I love reading. Books to me are such a beautiful way to absorb knowledge. I love feeling, just the feel of a book, the pages, turning the pages, just losing myself in that knowledge. And I love to write as well. So it's kind of that duality again. I love to read, absorb that information, articulate it as best I can, and then write in my own authentic style. That's how I kind of complete that learning, in a 360 degree fashion. Is I will read, I will kind of absorb, think, I might read several times, and then I go and create a lesson from what I have actually read so that I can integrate it at a very deep soul level. Again, that's just my personal way of how I'm able to articulate information and how I'm able to really ground it in a principle of understanding wisdom. Now, setting expectations for yourself. This is very important. Now, not only with the external world, so what you expect of the others that are around you, but setting proper expectations for your own self. Okay, what do I mean by this? How do you want to structure your day? What is the purpose for you in the next week, in the next 6 months, in the next year, in the next 5 years? So setting expectations is really important. Myself, I have always had a mindset of increasing my expectations incrementally as I learn more. So that means I'm going to expect more of my fitness, of my body. Right now I'm swimming twice a day and trying to work out at least once or twice a day. Now, again, people will say, well, that's kind of excessive. But when you really think about it, if you look at our ancestors before we have TVs and smartphones and everything else, they were working all day long, whether it was in the fields or in the house, keeping up the gardens. So, the expectation of utilizing your body in movement for a few hours a day is actually kind of in lack of where we should be with our physical fitness. Now, the other thing I don't do, and there's no wrong or right about this, but I like to layer my tasks so that I'm being very efficient and effective in a day. So I would prefer to be cleaning and, creating things, creating spaces, creating projects with my body in terms of my action. I like doing things, I like lifting things, I like movement. Okay, so I don't have to go to a gym and lift weights or do things like that. I certainly have a gym at home, so I do take time for that, but I'm not working out in it hours and hours. It's more so a very specific regimen that I stick to, which would be, getting out and about. I have an outdoor pool, so I like to get out in nature. I really like to meditate when I'm in the pool. When I am swimming, I'm very much thinking. So it's my space to be kind of immersed in that beautiful water. There's trees all around me, and whether it is something that I've read or something to do with something I'm creating, it's where I meditate is in the water. And then again, utilizing my entire day to really get out there and have movement in my body. So it's not that if we, are feeling like we're not grounded in our own vessel that we've been given. My biggest advice is you don't have to get a gym membership, just get out there and move, whether it's running, walking, cleaning your house, reorganizing things, helping somebody else. Just move and do something that is useful to your life. And you'll find when you're in movement, a lot of wonderful changes start to happen. When you reorganize a space, you just feel this renewed energy. I'm really big on feng shui. I love to really be detailed about the spaces that I reside in. I'm always changing little things. The reason I do this is it kind of moves the energy in the space. It keeps it fresh. And there's always something beautiful to look at, always something new. There's never stagnant energy, around yourself when you're always kind of reorganizing, creating better systems. Now, again, setting expectations. I'm a big infrastructure person, and I am big on creating systems and structure. So the more systematic your life is, the easier it is, the more blissful it is. And so how can I teach this in applicable terms? So let's say you're always losing your keys, your phone, you don't know where a tool is to, tighten up something on your tires, your lug nut, whatever it is. If you create systems within your living space where everything is so detailed and so organized, your life becomes blissful. One of the ways I do this is I color coordinate my closet so that every single color is, my clothes are all color coordinated. So when I'm looking to get up in the morning and head off to work, I know exactly, what colors to pull from, and then I can create, a really beautiful outfit literally in a nanosecond. I don't have to think about it. It's just there ready for me. I've also done the same thing, with all of my jewelry, everything to do with my accessorization. Now, again, for guys, that's going to be, well, actually, it is kind of applicable for men as well. I mean, if you're out in the world, if you're out in business, you should be trying to dress for success, and not in a cocky or arrogant way, or not in a way that you're full of yourself, but in a way that you're always bringing your best foot forward to each and every transaction. And that it's about valuing yourself. It's about setting that expectation that you are going to show up for yourself, you're going to show up for your family, you're going to show up for your coworkers. I think when you show up equally with 100% of who you are in every avenue in life, there becomes a certain respect that others give you, and there's also a certain character that you embody, and it's just this deep self-pride that you will have, because again that you're a well-organized person that cares about every little detail. So in terms of setting expectations setting expectations of how you want to treat others, I'm really big on this. I have a manifesto for myself in terms of how I'm going to treat all other human beings and all other creatures on the planet. And this, for me, it's a passion on every level. So it's not going to be just the individuals that I interact with in a small way. If it's somebody at the grocery store, how can I make them smile? How can I make them feel beautiful today? Maybe I'm going to tell them that they have a lovely smile, or maybe I'm going to let them know that they're doing a great job at the cash register. Maybe I'll tell them a story about how I started out, bagging groceries, or, making pizzas at Little Caesar's Pizza, however my life story unfolded. But really teaching those around you to see the value in the work they're doing and pride in where they are, because it doesn't matter where you start in life. If you have that attitude of thankfulness for the task in front of you, or your purpose in that moment, you just feel alive and you feel just a sense of joy. So setting expectations about how we're going to treat those around us, setting expectations about how we're going to treat ourselves. Same thing, I do not beat up on myself. I really like who and what I am. It's because I'm diligent with the way that I set expectation for myself and my boundaries. Setting expectations around what you want to see from yourself in terms of output, what you're creating. So again, I have very deliberate things that I want to do in my life. I know what they are. I know what it takes to execute on those dreams and goals, and I love the process of the journey. So, setting those type of expectations. Now, what happens if you run into things like situations that are traumatic? Maybe you're dealing with people that have an alcohol addiction in your life, people that maybe are doing drugs, maybe people that are not handling their finances properly. I mean, there's a myriad of things. Maybe people that are really ill, you know. I've gone through some really terrible sicknesses with people I love. You know, how are we setting expectations around dealing with those situations for ourselves? So first and foremost, I think it's always important to be ultra compassionate, but not go to the side of compassion where you are now being a martyr and that person's experience is pulling you down. If somebody is residing in really crazy, chaotic energy and they are not honoring their life path, or they're doing destructive things like drugs, alcohol, partying, gambling, you know, whether it be even getting into the spiral of, I don't know, what's the best way to put it? I'm just gonna say it as it is, because I've had lots of friends that go through this, unfortunately. They get into, you know, looking at too much pornography, they get into drugs, they get into this path of, you know, going to the strip clubs, going to massage things, right? Okay, this tends to be the masculine polarity. Not to say though that I haven't had girlfriends that also get into this spectrum, because of course, if that is happening in the masculine polarity, there's always gonna be feminine polarity that's going to match them and meet them there in that dark energy. So again, really setting expectations around, if people are in your life doing any of these chaotic things, how do you handle it, and how do you move away from it without getting your heart ripped out and without having it kind of you know, put you into a vortex of that descent, I guess is the best way to put it. For me, it's just a lot of self-love and knowing that I am not of that energy. So knowing that, I can kind of walk away. In my younger years, it was a lot more difficult to walk away. A little bit about my story. My first relationship was very difficult because it entailed heavy drug use from my partner. Okay, I never, at that point in my life, I didn't even drink alcohol. I hadn't even experimented with that much. So I was very sheltered in the sense of I didn't participate in anything going into my body that wasn't like a Slurpee or chocolate milk, essentially. And then I had to watch this very crazy energy unravel around me, which was, and again, I'm just going to be really authentic here, cocaine, crack cocaine, methamphetamines, so meth. And I had to live in that situation because I was in a partnership. I was in, you know, partnership in terms of businesses we owned, partnership in terms of living situation. Obviously, we owned a house together. And then seeing this really difficult energy or choices being made by somebody that you love very much and you can do nothing about it. It was extremely hard. So, you know, if you've ever watched an episode of Intervention, that was like my life for many years and very difficult to watch somebody go through that and not know how to help them. Because again, I was so focused on my studies, on creating businesses, on, at that time, I was competing in the fitness competitions, and you know, I love that part of my life. I really loved being on stage. I loved training. I loved the costume aspect of it, just getting dressed up for these different competitions. And I found that a really fun part of my life. I competed in the Canadian Miss Universe pageant, like just so many things that I was just passionate about. Of course, I was going to university at the time. I owned, you know, a few companies, you know, at a really young age, and just was doing, you know, a ton of volunteering as well. So at the same time, you know, when you compete at certain levels, like things like Miss Universe, you want to integrate volunteer hours as well, and where you're volunteering. So I had always done volunteering because it was really something that my grandparents, you know, instilled in me is helping others, and I loved that aspect of it. And then when I was going through this, you know, really weird vortex, I was actually, it was such a dichotomy because I was volunteering at an old folks home with these beautiful people. I was actually in the art department and helping them, you know, with crafting, scrapbooking. And then I would go into their rooms and like read for them or do beauty services, just help them. And I just loved the experience so much. I had so much fun just being in this beautiful environment where these older people had so much incredible wisdom, like the stories they would tell about their journeys and going through, different wars and going through these times that were just so, it was such a transition in history. Like, we can't even imagine what they lived through, the way they lived, just the stories of being out on the plains and, trading different things with the native indigenous people, and how some of these women were so strong. They would be, left alone because their husbands had to go, into the cities that, they'd have to travel by horse and buggy or horse and cart for multiple days. And you'd have these strong women alone on these homesteads by themselves, churning the butter, taking care of the gardens, like just the stories that I was so blessed to hear from this generation. I remember just sitting there, as I was visiting each of them, and just my heart space was so wide open as a young girl, just being able to listen to all these stories. So I've always carried them inside of me, and really, I would always benchmark myself against so many of these stories as well, because, just also the heavy, whether it would just be like the work they had to do, lifting the firewood, creating the home, just being, they were workhorses. These women were just such diligent, strong women. And so I would always feel like when I was working, how would I be if I was, on a farm like that, or living in a mud hut? I know my grandma, she actually, when she was born, she lived in this sort of, well, it was man-made, of course, but this hut that was made of grass and mud, and they would actually sweep the dirt floors. And she would explain to me these stories about sweeping the dirt and just, having that dirt very nice and flat, but still having pride in a home like that. And I just was so amazed at just everything about how my grandma carried herself. So this was my grandma June. I also had a grandma, Esther, both of them just incredible women, just such incredible women. But my grandma June specifically, she was very much a lady. Well, they both were, oh my God, how can I even say that? They were both very much ladies in different ways. But my grandma, Grandma June, she was so, she had such a beauty in the way that she held herself and put herself together on a very, on a budget. So she would always match all these colors, but she'd walk into a room and she would almost dress like a rainbow. And yet it wasn't just the way she dressed. She would just light up a room. She would hug everybody. She would, be kissing everybody, and just, if there was somebody in a room that you could tell felt a little bit insecure, that's the person she would go towards and just sit beside them and build them up and just make them feel like $1 million. Everybody that met her almost became her best friend. And I would watch this energy that she had, and I was just so amazed by how she carried herself. So again, I know that I went off on a little bit of a tangent here, but my purpose is really in talking about how you can be in a very difficult situation, some very dark energies, whether it is specifically you that has fallen into some sort of addiction, sort of this vortex of negativity. Usually what I've witnessed is, with my family and with those that are around me, that when you're dealing with addiction, no matter how it presents itself, there's also going to be a lot of lack of self-worth, and there's going to be a lot of depression, anger, irritability, and crazy chaotic energy in terms of lack of control over the entire beingness of that individual or those series of individuals. And that can pull you down if you are trying to build yourself up or create your perfect life. And what I've also noticed about that kind of chaos is that they will also play on your heartstrings. So they're, when people are in that lifestyle, they are also very broken, and they're also very much in need of love. And so they will gravitate to those, when they're in their free fall, or when they're in this sort of low spiraling energy, they will gravitate back to those people that are grounded in love, and they really need it, especially when they're in this tailspin. But the problem with that is that they're using your energy and they're pulling you from your purpose. So it took me a long time to realize that I had to walk away from that chaotic energy, and I had to block it out 100% because I'm a very caring, loving person. But I could not, and trust me, I tried many times to, put people through rehabs, do everything I possibly could, get them on the right track again, set them up with clothes, furniture, food, on and on and on and on. And it's been multiple people within my own family situation that I've gone through this with, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't matter how much love you give somebody else, if they're in that spiral down addiction energy, you will not be able to fix them. The only person that can fix them is themselves, and it is a journey. It's such a journey. They have to really dig deep and fight within themselves to want more, and they're always going to have that little bit of how do you put it? They're always going to have that call of that high in the back of their mind. And it's an inauthentic high, 100%. If you ever touch the precipice of a real, when you get into the energy of real bliss that is authentic, that is God aligned, that is true of, a deep, blissful, emotional connection, a divine connection, it is so far beyond what a drug could ever give you. And the way that I can explain what it would feel like is when somebody's residing or utilizing drugs, alcohol, pornography, whatever it is, sex addiction, when they're utilizing that, they'll always feel a lot of emptiness when they come out of whatever it is they're doing, like massive amounts of emptiness, sometimes to the point of being suicidal, sometimes to the point of just like they have to sleep for days, whatever it is. But they'll notice that going into that vortex just completely debases them and ungrounds them. Now, when you get to a certain spiritual high, it's the opposite. So you will feel bliss, being a nirvana, is essentially beyond anything that you can conceptualize when you can walk into that higher realm. But it has a residual output of exponential expanding energy. So when you are done going into this place of utter bliss, when you're doing it correctly through the mind with no other substances, and when you're meeting your divine counterpart in union, whatever that is, with it, whether it's a conversation, whether it is being in their energy, whether it is actually physically contact with them, like something where you're actually of course joining in the physical. It is a different experience, and it will give you energy for days. It's so much energy that you get from it, actually, that it can last years, literally, from one very simple experience. So here's the thing about it. That's how you will know, in terms of setting expectations, that's how you will know if you are walking into a divine relationship, or if you are walking into a karmic relationship, or a relationship that is meant to test you. And both are okay. I mean, you're allowed to walk into these tests for a reason. It's for your soul's growth. You have karma that you've built up over many lifetimes that you have to balance. You have to balance that karma, and you have to know the soul lesson deep within what you are, and you have to choose it authentically. And sometimes, most times, you have to choose it over and over and over again until you know it becomes you, until the lesson is you, until you are the word, right? Like that's how it's meant to happen, and that's how all of us have to progress through our lifetimes.